There are Colt pistols that get romanticized. The single-action army, the original 1911 World War II pistols with their parkerized finish and history-soaked steel. And then there's the Colt 1991A1, a gun that enthusiasts argue about relentlessly, but rarely actually understand. Some call it a budget Colt. Some dismiss it as not a real government model. Others might argue it's one of the best guns Colt's ever made. Today we're slowing down and doing something that almost nobody does anymore. We're going to actually understand the Colt 1991A1. Why does it exist? What was Colt dealing with when this gun was created? What makes it different from the previous Colts? And why its reputation does not match its reality. Because the truth is, the 1991A1 may be the most misunderstood Colt 1911 ever produced. To understand the 1991A1, you need to understand what Colt had just gone through before they designed this. By the mid-1980s, Colt's manufacturing company was no longer the untouchable Americana giant that you imagine when you hear the name Colt. The company had just been hit with major labor strikes, most notably in 1985. These strikes didn't just pause production, but permanently changed how Colt built guns. And when the strikes ended, many of Colt's most experienced craftsmen were gone. Decades of institutional knowledge, polishers, finishers, and craftsmen that had learned their arts the old way. They had walked out the door. Now, Colt didn't collapse, but it did have to rebuild. And that rebuilding happened at the exact same moment that the entire firearms market was shifting under Colt's feet. 2 years earlier, the US military had moved on to an Italian gun, the M9 Beretta. Polymer pistols, like the Glock, were emerging in the market. And foreign manufacturers, like Turkey, were flooding the market with cheaper 1911 pattern guns. And Colt was suddenly trying to do three things at once: restart uninterrupted production, compete for price, and survive in a market that no longer cared about heritage and prestige of the Colt name. And this is what people in the gun community refer to as Colt's wilderness years. And the Colt 1991A1 is a product of that moment. It's not a celebration piece, it's not a nostalgia gun, but a survival pistol. It was Colt asking a very practical question. How do we keep building a real Colt 1911 in a world that no longer gives us special treatment? And their answer wasn't to abandon quality where quality mattered, but to strip away anything that was not essential. And that philosophy, born out of the post-strike reality, is the DNA of the 1991A1. And to understand what Colt was willing to keep and what they chose to let go, we have to talk about the pistol's name. Because the word 1991A1 tells you more than what most people realize. The name itself causes confusion. Many of these early models are marked M1991A1, which would make you think it's a clone of the military 1911A1. It's not. The 1991 is a marketing shorthand. It's Colt's way of saying, this is a modern Colt 1911, built for the post-military world. Mechanically, this is a Series 80 pistol, built in Colt's lineup of government size, commander size, and officer size. This one happens to be a commander chambered in .45. And this gun is meant to be a baseline working Colt. Think of it like this. The government model is Colt saying, this is our heritage. The 1991 is saying, this is our survival. Let's address the Series 80 real quick. And let's be honest, this topic is usually dominated by internet geniuses instead of reality. What the Series 80 is adding a firing pin safety to the 1911 platform, which means that the firing pin is physically blocked from hitting the primer unless the trigger is pulled. Why? Because Colt was responding to product liability concerns, drop safety expectations, and a changing legal environment. Now here's the controversial part. People claim that Series 80s ruins the trigger on the 1911. In theory, Yes, it adds more moving parts to the trigger pull system. In practice, most shooters can't tell the difference, unless the trigger job is really poorly done. Thousands of competition pistols run the Series 80 system. Thousands of duty pistols rely on them. The new Staccato HDs are Series 80, and those are apparently fantastic, although I haven't touched one. The truth is simple though. A well-done Series 80 trigger is a good trigger. And the 1991s were never modeled as bullseye pistols anyways. They're marketed as safe, durable, affordable Colts. Having said all that, I got this Series 80 to Series 70 conversion shim because fuck Series 80. Moving on, here's where the 1991A1 earns its reputation. Colt had to reduce costs, but they were strategic about it. The guns came with matte and parkerized finishes, basic sights that you would see on our more classic war guns, plain grips, composite or polymer parts, as well as MIMmed parts. We'll talk about forged and billet and MIMmed in a future video. But yes, some of these guns had plastic triggers and mainspring housings. And that offended 1911 purists. But here's the key detail that most people miss. Colt did not cheap out on the frame, slide, and barrel. The bones of the 1911. They're still forged, heat treated, and built to standard Colt dimensions. Look, I'll show you. Colt assumes that many buyers of a cheaper 1911 would shoot the gun hard, customize it after buying it, and replace parts over time because it's a cheap gun meant to be shot. Cheap's not the right word. More affordable. But Colt was right. These more affordable guns have great bones and are therefore great for customizing. Let's take a look at this 1991. If you can ignore that the previous owner finished this to look like someone had diarrhea on a battleship, then go ahead and take a closer look with me. Two of the big machine work parts, the slide has been cut to take aftermarket sights instead of the shitty sights that these came with. Shitty as in military style 1911 sights. And they also had the front strap checkered, which these did not come with. And it feels super nice. Additionally, the plastic trigger has been replaced with a 3-hole Wilson Combat trigger, which is very well fit, if I may add. The previous owner replaced the plastic mainspring housing with this solid steel Wilson Combat wedge. They must have liked the arched mainspring housings on the government model A1s, because these did come with flat mainspring housings. They replaced both the A1 style grip safety with this Wilson Combat beaver tail grip, and they replaced the government style hammer with a Wilson Combat Delta style skeletonized hammer. Also, all of the internal parts are swapped out for, as far as I can tell, solid steel Wilson Combat parts. And the barrel on this gun is so well fit, like unbelievably well fit for a Colt. This is still a Colt 45 auto barrel, so as far as I can tell, this is the stock barrel. According to Colt serial number webpage, this is a 2001 build, so I guess in that era the barrel fitter was fantastic. Sorry, I got off track. Let's talk the reality of the pistol now. The 1991A1 has a reputation for being plain, honest, and more reliable than internet geniuses might suggest. It is a very functional, reliable, working 1911. It's not a safe queen, it's not a race gun, it's a 1911 that you would actually train with. The 1991s came in all 3 sizes. For those of you who don't know what they are, let's run through them real quick. It came in the government length, which is your standard 5-inch barrel 1911. This is how it was designed, and this is the sweet spot of the 1911. It's the most forgiving, most reliable, and most authentic to John Moses Browning's design. This is the commander-sized Colt 1911, which is a 4¼ inch barrel. This size balances reliability with shootability. The only thing I would really note is that they're a bit more spring sensitive than the full-size government models. The other size is the officer, which I don't own. The officer has a 3½ inch barrel, and this is where physics catch up to the 1911 design. With a shorter slide, it needs tighter timing, which makes it a little bit more sensitive to magazines and ammo. And that's not a flaw of Colt, it's just a short 1911 reality. The 1991 is known as the budget Colt. But it really is a great base gun for custom builds. Why? Because like I said, forged slide, forged frame, there's no expensive factory things that it came with that you're getting rid of. It's Colt's known dimensions and known metallurgy. If you search online, you'll find a lot of very nice custom builds that were built on a 1991. And that alone should tell you something. The 1991A1 sits in a weird place today. It's not rare, it's not ultra collectible, but it is historically important. Modified guns often lose collector appeal, but gain actual shooter value. I saw this particular pistol in the used gun case at Springs Armory in Colorado Springs, and I had to ask to touch it. I was like, that doesn't look like a bare bones 1991A1. That's got all sorts of stuff going on, as I already explained. And when I held it in my hand, I said to myself, if I strip the Battleship Diarrhea off of this, Battleship being the ugly gray Cerakote, Diarrhea being these tan Magpul grips, and I mail this off to get stripped and done in full chrome, or chrome and gold, or something else super gaudy, knowing that the barrel fit is already exceptional and it has all this custom work, specifically the front checkering, and I would also put a magwell on this and get rid of this wedge. This could be the absolute most baller, most, as Eli from Alchemy Custom Weaponry would say, gangster carry gun ever. And considering how cheap I got this out of the used gun case, like, oh yeah. Big excitement. So this will be getting sent off to get chromed. And that's kind of the point of this gun. The 1991 was never meant to be worshipped. It was meant to be used and customized. The Colt 1991A1 isn't glamorous. It doesn't scream heritage. It doesn't chase trends. It doesn't beg for attention. What it represents is something more important. It represents Colt choosing to stay relevant as it entered the 90s. It represents the bridge between old school military pistols and the modern civilian market we're living in today. It's the Colt for people who actually shoot. A Colt you don't feel guilty modifying. A Colt that reminds us that firearms are tools before they're collectible. And maybe that's why it's misunderstood. Because in a world where we're all obsessed with perfection and collectability, the 1991A1 remains honest. Thanks for watching.